The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Clarence House as King Charles III sat in his private study, reviewing a stack of official documents. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he turned each page. Not from age, but from the weight of the decision he was about to make. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked steadily, marking each second that brought him closer to a conversation that would change everything. Camilla, now queen consort, was in the drawing room hosting her weekly tea with her sister Annabelle and her children from her first marriage, Tom and Laura. Their laughter echoed through the corridors, a sound that had become precious to Charles over the years. For decades, he had watched Camilla's family become an integral part of royal life, attending state functions, enjoying the privileges that came with their connection to the crown. But recent events had forced Charles into an impossible position. The British public, still adjusting to Camilla's role as queen consort, had grown increasingly vocal about what they perceived as favoritism toward her relatives. Social media buzzed with criticism about the Parker Bowles family's prominent presence at royal events. Tabloid newspapers ran daily stories questioning whether Camilla's children and siblings deserved their royal privileges when other working royals had been scaled back. The final straw came during the previous week's state dinner for the French president. Photographs of Tom Parker Bowles seated at the high table, while Prince Edward's children were relegated to a lower-profile position, had sparked outrage among monarchists and Republicans alike. The palace's phone lines had been flooded with complaints, and several members of Parliament had publicly questioned the appropriateness of such arrangements. Charles had spent sleepless nights weighing his options. On one hand, he understood the public's concerns about maintaining the monarchy's integrity and ensuring that royal privileges were distributed fairly. On the other hand, he knew that any decision to limit Camilla's family's involvement would devastate his wife, who had already sacrificed so much to be by his side. His private secretary, Sir William Montgomery, knocked gently on the study door before entering with a grave expression. "Your Majesty, the press office has received over 3,000 letters in the past week alone. The sentiment is quite clear. The public wants a more streamlined royal family, focused on the direct line of succession." Charles nodded slowly, knowing this moment had been inevitable. "And what of the constitutional experts' advice?" "They're unanimous, sir. While there's no legal requirement to change anything, they believe it would strengthen the monarchy's position if we were to recalibrate the involvement of extended family members. The comparison to other European monarchies is quite stark. They've all moved towards smaller, more focused royal families." The king stood and walked to the window overlooking the garden where his grandchildren often played. He could see Prince George in the distance, learning to ride his new bicycle while his protection officers watched discreetly. The weight of ensuring a stable future for that little boy, and for the institution he represented, pressed heavily on Charles's shoulders. "Schedule a private meeting with the queen consort for this afternoon," he said quietly. "And please ask Tom and Laura to come to Clarence House tomorrow evening. Annabelle as well. I'll speak to them personally." Sir William hesitated. "Sir, might I suggest that you speak with the queen consort first? This news will be difficult for her to hear." Charles turned back to his desk, his face showing the strain of kingship more clearly than ever before. "Indeed it will be, William, indeed it will be." Later that afternoon, as the autumn light faded to dusk, Charles found Camilla in her private sitting room, surrounded by photo albums from recent family gatherings. She looked up with a warm smile as he entered, but her expression quickly changed when she saw the seriousness in his eyes. "My dear," he began, settling into the chair across from her, "we need to discuss something rather important." Camilla closed the photo album slowly, her intuition telling her that whatever Charles was about to say would change their lives significantly. "It's about my family, isn't it? The criticism in the press? Among other things, yes." Charles reached across to take her hand. "The palace has been conducting a comprehensive review of royal roles and responsibilities. Given the current political climate and public sentiment, we need to make some adjustments to ensure the monarchy's long-term stability." "What kind of adjustments?" Camilla's voice was barely above a whisper, though she suspected she already knew the answer. Charles took a deep breath before continuing. "Tom and Laura will need to step back from their official royal duties. No more state dinners. No more official photographs. No more use of royal titles in their professional endeavors. Annabelle as well. Her involvement in royal charitable patronages will need to be reconsidered. Oh, reconsidered. Only no. The silence that followed seemed to stretch on forever. Camilla's face went through a range of emotions: shock, understanding, and finally, a deep sadness that made Charles's heart ache. "They've done nothing wrong," she said finally, her voice steady despite the pain in her eyes. "Tom has been nothing but respectful and appropriate in his role. Laura has supported every charity event I've asked her to attend. And Annabelle, she's been my anchor through everything. I know, my darling. I know. This isn't about their behavior or their character. This is about public perception and the future of the monarchy. The people want to see a more focused royal family, one that clearly represents the constitutional succession." Camilla stood and walked to the window, her arms wrapped around herself as if trying to hold together something that was falling apart. "You're asking me to choose between my family and my role as queen consort." "No," Charles said firmly, joining her at the window. "I would never ask you to choose. Your family will always be your family. But their public role, alongside the monarchy, must change. They can still attend private family gatherings, personal celebrations, informal events, but the official, public aspects must end," Camilla finished for him, her voice hollow. "When? The transition will begin immediately, but we'll handle it gradually over the next 3 months. I want to speak with them personally, to explain the reasoning, and to ensure they understand this reflects no judgment on their character or our affection for them." Camilla remained silent for several long minutes, processing the implications of what Charles had told her. Her children had grown up knowing that their mother's relationship with the future king would bring both privileges and responsibilities. They had handled both with grace and dignity. Now, through no fault of their own, that chapter was closing. "How do I tell them?" she asked finally, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "We'll tell them together. Tomorrow evening, here at Clarence House. I'll explain the constitutional necessities, and you can help them understand that this doesn't change how much we value them or love them." As night fell completely, Charles and Camilla stood together at the window, both understanding that their marriage was about to face one of its greatest tests. The king knew he was asking his wife to watch her family be pushed to the sidelines, even as she herself stepped more fully into the spotlight. The queen consort knew that the man she loved was being forced to make an impossible choice between his personal happiness and his duty to the crown. Neither of them spoke of the irony that Charles himself had once been in a similar position, forced to choose between duty and his heart. This time, however, the stakes felt even higher, and the casualties would include people they both loved dearly. The grandfather clock struck 9, its chimes echoing through the quiet house, marking the end of an era none of them had seen coming. The following evening arrived with an unexpected autumn storm. Rain lashed against the windows of Clarence House as Tom Parker Bowles, Laura Lopes, and Annabelle Elliott made their way through the private entrance, each wondering why they had been summoned for such a formal family meeting. The usually warm and inviting atmosphere of the house felt different somehow, charged with intention they couldn't quite identify. Tom, now in his late 40s and a successful food writer, had always been careful to maintain his own career separate from royal duties, but he had genuinely enjoyed the charitable work and occasional state functions. Laura, an art curator and mother of 3, had found meaning in supporting causes close to Camilla's heart. Annabelle, Camilla's younger sister and closest confidant, had become an unofficial advisor on matters of protocol and family dynamics. They gathered in the blue drawing room, where Charles and Camilla were waiting. The king wore his naval uniform, a choice that immediately signaled the formal nature of the evening, while Camilla was dressed in a simple black dress that seemed to drain the color from her usually vibrant appearance. "Please, sit down," Charles said, gesturing to the carefully arranged chairs. His voice carried the weight of kingship in a way that made even his stepchildren straighten their postures. Tom was the first to sense that something significant was about to happen. "This feels rather official, Charles. Are we in trouble?" he asked with a nervous laugh, trying to lighten the mood. "Not in trouble, no," Charles replied, taking his place beside Camilla. "But we do have some important matters to discuss regarding the future structure of royal responsibilities." Laura reached over and squeezed her mother's hand, noticing how pale and tense Camilla appeared. "Mummy, you look as if you're about to deliver terrible news." "What's wrong?" Camilla's composure began to crack slightly, but she steadied herself with visible effort. "It's not terrible news, darling. It's necessary news. Changes that need to be made." Charles cleared his throat and began the speech he had practiced dozens of times. "As you all know, the monarchy is constantly evolving to meet the expectations of the British people and the Commonwealth. Recent polling and public feedback have made it clear that there's a desire for a more streamlined royal family, one that focuses primarily on the direct line of succession." Annabelle, who had spent years helping Camilla navigate the complexities of royal life, immediately understood the implications. "You're scaling back our involvement," she said quietly. "Officially, I mean." "Yes," Charles confirmed, relieved that at least one person in the room grasped the situation quickly. "Beginning next month, there will be significant changes to how family members participate in royal duties. The public appearances, the state functions, the official charitable patronages. These will be limited to working members of the royal family." The silence that followed was deafening. Tom was the first to break it, his journalist instincts kicking in. "Are you saying we're being dismissed? After all these years?" "You're not being dismissed from the family, Tom," Camilla said, her voice strained. "You're being asked to step back from the public aspects of royal life. You'll always be my son, always be part of this family in private." Laura's face went through a series of emotions as she processed what she was hearing. "The charity galas I've been planning, the youth art programs I've been developing with the Royal Collection. All of that has to end?" "I'm afraid so," Charles said gently. "The palace communications team has been very clear that public opinion is moving strongly in favor of a more focused approach to royal duties. The comparison being made is to the Swedish and Dutch royal families, which have successfully modernized by limiting official roles to immediate family members." Tom leaned back in his chair, running his hands through his hair. "This is about the photographs from the French state dinner, isn't it? The criticism about where I was seated? That was certainly a catalyst," Charles admitted. "But this has been building for some time. The constitutional experts have been advising a more streamlined approach for months." Annabelle, who had remained quiet throughout most of the conversation, finally spoke up. "Camilla, how are you feeling about all this? This must be devastating for you." At her sister's words, Camilla's carefully maintained composure finally crumbled. Tears began streaming down her face as she struggled to find words. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I'm so terribly sorry. I know how much your involvement has meant to you, and how hard you've all worked to support the crown." Laura immediately moved to sit beside her mother, wrapping her arms around her. "Mummy, this isn't your fault. You didn't choose this." "Didn't I, though?" Camilla asked through her tears. "I chose to marry Charles, knowing what that would mean for all of you. I chose to accept the role of queen consort, knowing it would put our family under scrutiny. And now I've chosen to stay in this role, even when it means pushing you away." Charles watched his wife break down and felt something tear inside his chest. For all the preparation, all the constitutional advice, nothing had prepared him for seeing Camilla's pain or her family's disappointment. "Perhaps," Tom said slowly, "we should have seen this coming. The monarchy is bigger than any of us, bigger than our feelings or our comfort. If this is what's needed for the institution to survive and thrive, then we should support it." His generous response only made Camilla cry harder. "You shouldn't have to be understanding about this, Tom. None of you should. You've given years of your lives to support causes that matter. And now you're being told it was all temporary, all conditional." Annabelle moved to Camilla's other side, creating a circle of support around her sister. "We knew the risks when we took on these roles, Camilla. We understood that royal life comes with unique pressures and requirements. If this is what Charles needs to do to protect the monarchy, then we support it. But it feels so unfair," Laura said, her own voice breaking slightly. You've sacrificed so much already. Mummy, your privacy, your normal family life, even your relationship with your children for years, when the divorce was so public and painful. And now this. Charles stood up abruptly, unable to remain seated while his family fell apart around him. I want you all to know that this is the most difficult decision I've made as king. You've each brought nothing but honor and dignity to your roles. Tom, your charitable work has been exemplary. Laura, your contributions to arts education have been genuinely meaningful. And Annabelle, you've been an invaluable support to Camilla and to me personally. Then why does it have to end? Camilla asked, looking up at her husband with red-rimmed eyes. If we're all doing good work, if we're not causing scandals or embarrassments, why can't things continue as they are? Because the people don't want things to continue as they are, Charles said, his voice heavy with regret. The polling numbers are quite clear. There's significant support for reducing the number of people who receive royal privileges and public funding. Even though your family doesn't receive direct funding, the public perception is that royal status is being distributed too broadly. Tom stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the storm that seemed to mirror the emotional turbulence in the room. I suppose I understand the logic. The people want transparency, accountability, a clear sense of who's working for them and who's just adjacent to power. You were never adjacent to power, Camilla said firmly. You were part of the team, part of the mission to serve the British people and the Commonwealth, but not part of the constitutional monarchy, Annabelle observed quietly. We were part of the king's extended family, not part of the institution itself. There's a difference, even if it didn't always feel that way. The conversation continued for another 2 hours, covering practical details like transitioning out of charitable patronages, handling media inquiries about the changes, and maintaining family relationships while respecting the new boundaries. By the time they finished, everyone in the room felt emotionally drained. As Tom, Laura, and Annabelle prepared to leave, each of them made a point of embracing both Charles and Camilla warmly, reassuring them that family bonds would remain strong despite the professional changes. But as their cars pulled away from Clarence House, Camilla collapsed into Charles's arms, finally allowing herself to fully grieve what felt like a profound loss. I've failed them, she sobbed against his chest. I've failed as a mother, as a sister, as a protector of the people I love most. No, my darling, Charles whispered, stroking her hair. You've succeeded as queen consort. You've put the crown before your personal desires, just as monarchs have done for centuries. It doesn't make it hurt less, but it makes it right. But as they stood together in the empty drawing room, both of them knew that something fundamental had shifted in their family, and neither was sure how to begin healing from it. 3 weeks after the devastating family meeting, the changes began to take effect in ways that no one had fully anticipated. The first sign came when Laura arrived at the National Portrait Gallery for what she thought was a routine meeting about the youth art education program she had been developing. Instead, she was politely informed by the director that the program would be transitioning to alternative leadership, and that her services would no longer be required. The dismissal was handled with perfect courtesy and genuine regret, but Laura left the building feeling hollow. For 2 years, she had poured her expertise and passion into creating opportunities for young artists from disadvantaged backgrounds. The program was showing real results, with several students already receiving scholarships and recognition. Now, all of that would continue without her, as if her contribution had been easily replaceable. Meanwhile, Tom faced his own challenges as food magazines and television producers began quietly distancing themselves from projects that had previously celebrated his royal connections. The food writer who had built his career on talent and expertise suddenly found himself questioning whether his success had been authentic or merely a byproduct of his famous stepfather. Annabelle's transition proved perhaps the most heartbreaking of all. For 15 years, she had been Camilla's closest advisor, helping her navigate everything from wardrobe choices to protocol questions. Their daily phone calls, their joint planning sessions for charity events, their sisterly companionship during difficult moments. All of it had to be dramatically scaled back to avoid any appearance of improper influence. At Clarence House, The impact on Camilla was becoming increasingly visible to everyone around her. The queen consort, who had always been known for her warmth and engaging personality during public appearances, seemed to be withdrawing into herself. Her private secretary noticed that she spent long periods staring out windows, often forgetting about scheduled meetings or arriving late to engagements. The breaking point came during a particularly difficult week in November. Camilla was scheduled to attend a gala dinner for a children's charity that had been close to her heart for decades. It was the kind of event where she would normally shine, connecting with donors and beneficiaries alike with genuine enthusiasm. But as she prepared for the evening, the full weight of her isolation seemed to crash down on her at once. Standing in her dressing room, surrounded by the trappings of royal life that had once seemed like privileges, Camilla suddenly felt like she was suffocating. The beautiful gown hanging on its stand looked like a costume for a role she no longer wanted to play. The jewelry that would be selected for her felt like chains. The speech that had been prepared for her seemed like words written for a stranger. "I can't do this," she whispered to her lady-in-waiting, Caroline Henderson, who had been with her for nearly a decade. "I can't pretend that everything is fine when I've lost my family, lost the people who made all of this meaningful." Caroline, who had watched Camilla transform from a nervous new royal into a confident queen consort, had never seen her employer in such distress. "Your Majesty, perhaps you need to speak with the king about how you're feeling." "Charles is dealing with enough pressure," Camilla replied, sinking into a chair. "Parliament is questioning his decisions. The press is analyzing every move he makes. And the public is still divided about whether the monarchy should even exist in the modern world. I can't add my personal breakdown to his burdens." But that evening, Camilla's emotional state became impossible to hide. During the charity gala, she excused herself twice during dinner, returning each time with red-rimmed eyes despite attempts to disguise her tears with makeup. When she rose to give her speech about the importance of supporting vulnerable children, her voice cracked on the third sentence, and she had to pause for nearly 30 seconds to compose herself. The moment that would haunt everyone present came when a young girl who had benefited from the charity's programs presented Camilla with a handmade card thanking her for her support. As Camilla knelt down to receive the gift, the child innocently asked, "Your Majesty, why do you look so sad? Did someone hurt your feelings?" The question, asked with such pure concern, broke through all of Camilla's royal training and emotional barriers. She burst into tears in front of 300 guests, unable to maintain her composure any longer. The room fell silent as the queen consort wept openly, her shoulders shaking with the force of emotions she had been suppressing for weeks. Charles, who had been across the room speaking with donors, immediately rushed to his wife's side. Without regard for protocol or public appearance, he gathered Camilla into his arms and held her as she cried, whispering words of comfort that no one else could hear. The security team, trained to handle every conceivable crisis except this one, moved with quiet efficiency to provide some privacy, while the royal couple dealt with what was clearly a deeply personal moment. The charity's chairman quickly stepped forward to continue the evening's proceedings, while Charles and Camilla were escorted to a private room. In the small office behind the main hall, Camilla finally spoke the words she had been unable to say for weeks. "I can't lose my family, Charles. I know why it had to happen. I understand the constitutional reasons. But I can't bear feeling like I've betrayed the people who stood by me through everything." "You haven't betrayed anyone, my darling," Charles said, still holding her close. "You've made an impossible sacrifice for the good of the monarchy, just as every royal consort has had to make sacrifices throughout history. But their sacrifices were different," Camilla sobbed. "They gave up privacy, gave up normal lives. I've given up my children's respect, my sister's daily companionship, my sense of being a good mother and sister. I look in the mirror and don't recognize myself anymore." Charles felt his own eyes filling with tears as he fully grasped what his decision had cost the woman he loved. "What do you need from me? How can I help you through this? I need to know that we can find a way back to each other as a family," Camilla said, pulling back to look directly into his eyes. "Not the public family, not the royal family, but our actual family. Tom and Laura, and Annabelle, and me and you. I need to know that this role hasn't cost me everything that made life worth living." That night, Charles made several phone calls that no constitutional expert would have advised. He called Tom, Laura, and Annabel personally, not as king, but as a stepfather and brother-in-law who had watched his wife break down completely. "The public aspects of your royal roles have ended," he told each of them. "But I want you to know that the private aspects, the family aspects, will continue exactly as they always have. Sunday dinners, birthday celebrations, family holidays. Nothing about our personal relationships needs to change. Camilla needs her family now more than ever." The response from each of them was immediate and wholehearted. Tom arranged to visit the next day, bringing Camilla's favorite flowers and a new manuscript he was working on that he wanted her opinion about. Laura planned a private lunch for just the two of them, away from all royal duties and obligations. Annabel simply showed up at Clarence's house that same evening, armed with a bottle of wine and a determination to spend the night talking through everything with her sister. Over the following weeks, a new routine emerged. The public saw a queen consort who gradually regained her composure and confidence, fulfilling her duties with renewed purpose. But privately, Camilla rebuilt her relationships with her family members on terms that had nothing to do with royal protocol or public perception. The guards at Clarence's house, who had witnessed the devastating breakdown that night after the charity gala, also observed the slow but steady recovery that followed. They watched Tom arrive for regular dinners, his motorcycle parked discreetly in the private courtyard. They saw Laura's children playing in the garden during weekend visits that never appeared in the court circular. They noticed how Camilla's posture changed when Annabel arrived for their weekly walks through the grounds. Most importantly, they witnessed the gradual return of laughter to the house. The queen consort, who had been silent and withdrawn for weeks, began humming again while reviewing her correspondence. The king, who had carried the weight of his decision like a physical burden, started smiling during private moments when he thought no one was watching. 6 months after the most difficult decision of his reign, Charles stood in the same blue drawing room where he had delivered the devastating news to Camilla's family. This time, he was hosting a private celebration for Tom's latest book publication, an event that would never appear in official records but meant everything to the people gathered there. As he watched Camilla laugh at one of her son's stories, surrounded by the people she loved most in the world, Charles realized that sometimes the greatest victory for a monarch isn't preserving the institution at all costs, but finding ways to preserve the humanity within it. The crown had demanded its sacrifices, and they had been made. But love, it turned out, could find ways to survive even the most impossible circumstances, as long as the people involved were willing to fight for what mattered most. The guards who witnessed both the breakdown and the recovery would later say that they had learned something important about the difference between public duty and private devotion, and how the strongest people somehow managed to honor both.